Close out all my Gmail so we don't get chat noises.
Oh, given how my last 24 hours has gone, it's almost certain that we're going to have some kind of technological difficulty. Anyway, here we are in the interview for, let's see if I can get this right, House District 52.
That's correct.
Great. Representative Anna Williams is here. Her opponent is Jeff Helfrich, who I believe you campaigned against Jeff last time, right? It was
Yep.
It's a rematch.
Exactly.
And why don't you tell us, in the 2 years since the last time we had this conversation, what have you achieved in the legislature?
Well, the last 2 years in the legislature have been more dramatic than any previous 2-year cycle from what I've been told. It was my first time, so it's sort of my scaling experience, so I don't know any different. I was able to pass a law that expanded the Office of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman in order to make sure we had enough volunteer ombuds people to cover all the long-term care facilities throughout the state. That's probably the biggest bill that I've been able to pass. Some of the bills that I had didn't pass, they passed the House side and didn't get through the Senate because of the walkout. I was also recently able to finally secure $1 million in CARES Act funding for the Child Advocacy Center Network through the Legislature's Emergency Board. That was a bill I was sponsoring in the short session and was able to get that funding out the door at that time. And this is slightly different funding. Obviously, it's CARES Act funding, but really my priority is making sure that those organizations are funded well enough to meet the mandate that the state has set for them in terms of doing the child abuse investigations and liaising with law enforcement and DHS child welfare. Separate from that, I've really focused on bringing a rural perspective to the policies that are passed. So bills that aren't mine, but that I was able to have a significant influence on include House Bill 2001, the infill bill that was sponsored by Speaker Kotek's office. We added more flexibility for communities under 10,000 and additional admin support for smaller towns who may not have the staff to do the planning work that was called for in that bill. The diesel standard bill, I pushed for it to be a regional implementation, since folks in my area of the district, well, of the state, drive longer distances on average than people who live in more urban communities, and that was changed. And then on the clean energy jobs bill, which again didn't pass, I pushed for regional staged implementation to make sure that rural communities had time to prepare for the changes that bill was calling for and put some things in place, again, because we don't have as large of municipal planning departments as the cities do. So I think the biggest thing I've accomplished is being able to really be a voice for rural Oregon and making sure that progressive policy will work in rural, suburban, and frontier communities across the state.
Remind us, if you would, the boundaries of your district, more or less.
I have all of Hood River County. I have Clackamas County down to Sandy, and I have East Multnomah. If you kind of follow the Sandy River up, I get a little bit of East Gresham and a tiny bit of East Troutdale, but mostly it's all that rural Multnomah County area, including Corbett.
You have Cascade Locks?
I do.
My favorite town in Oregon, for what it's worth.
It's such a great town.
Isn't it? So what is your top priority for the next session?
Really, in the next session, I think the only thing we can reasonably focus on is that sort of intersecting recovery from both wildfires and COVID. A lot of the work we're going to need to do for both of those recovery efforts are the same. We need to be focusing on making sure people still have work to go to that can help them pay their bills, that they have access to health care, and that they can stay healthy and safe. Whether that's PPE support or additional support to small businesses to understand how to keep their employees and customers safe. Those are the places that I'm going to be really focusing on in the short term. I'm on the Regional Wildfire Recovery Council. I'm convening it. And so really digging in on what do my constituents need to recover from the wildfires and what is the state's ability to meet those needs and where else do we need to look in terms of federal support if the state doesn't have the resources to address those issues. Once that's done, I'll be focusing on childcare issues, some long-term care again, and continuing to do the oversight work that the legislature is tasked to do, and I don't think does quite enough of it. So improving the unemployment division and continuing to work with DHS to make sure that they're doing their work in the way their mission dictates they should be.
How much was your district touched by the wildfires?
So I have Clackamas County. We had people who were on level 2 and level 3 evacuation outside of Estacada, and in the Sandy area. They're not Sandy city limits, but Sandy addresses. We did not lose homes. We lost a few buildings. We had a fire that started in Corbett that was human caused. And quite a bit of the people who were evacuating came to our district, and many are still here.
How would you grade the governor's response to the wildfires on a A to F grading scale?
I give her an A-, B+. I thought she actually did really, really well. In fact, I might upgrade that to just a straight up A. I thought she worked well with the emergency command folks. I was able to really think strategically about what resources we had and where they needed to go. I think there are people who have pointed out concerns about some of our helicopters being in other parts of the country or other countries, and us not having some of those resources available. There's nothing she could have done in the moment to have fixed that, and I think with what she had, she did a pretty excellent job. And now we need to look forward and focus on the recovery, and I am heartened by the level of attention and energy that she's also put into that effort.
There's obviously a debate that goes on a partisan level around climate change or forest management. I happen to be of the view that it's a both and kind of thing. In your district, do you see room for change or need for change on how we manage forests to create less tinder for these fires?
Absolutely. I think I agree with you on the both and. That's generally my perspective on most things. We need to do a better job of coordinating with the federal agencies that dictate how forest management happens on the vast majority of Oregon's public lands. We have some logging companies in my district that are really forward thinking with regard to how they handle fire scarred areas. There's a company in my district that will go in if it's a private property that was burned and clear the burned brush and old logs that present a reburn risk and actually just sell it for firewood. They do it for free because it protects their property as well. I think that there are ways that we can invest in better forest management and help people have jobs in that field. But it's absolutely not the only piece of the puzzle. We also need to think about where people are building homes, what types of requirements we have where we're building in the wildland urban interface. Clackamas County is doing something really cool where they're actually doing a land swap with some people who have properties in areas that are high burn risk areas that they want to build on, and they're trying to help them get an equivalent property elsewhere that's not so high risk. So being really creative with our planning is part of it. And then also, like you said, climate mitigation and resiliency have to be a part of that conversation, both from a tree management, but a water management, and then also looking at, stream side setbacks, logging regulations, what kinds of pesticides we're using. It's all of these things.
Leticia, do you have questions at this point? I have some more, but I figured I talked enough.
I'm kind of asking this to most people, but how would you rank law enforcement or grade law enforcement's response to the ongoing protests on an A to F scale as well?
So I think that is specific to different law enforcement entities. I would give the PPB, Portland Police Bureau, a D in terms of how they've responded. I think that Oregon State Police have been a little bit more even-handed from what I have seen, but I don't live in Portland and I'm not at the protests. And so as much as I don't enjoy Portland telling my district how to live and how to solve their problems, I'm trying to give them the same level of respect and understand that they have a lot more context of the nuance that's going on there. I'd like to see the mayor sit down with a bunch of different affected parties and really try to better understand what the concerns are and make sure that the real and honest concerns of the protesters are acknowledged and being worked on, while at the same time, law enforcement doesn't feel like they're constantly under siege, which is what I'm getting from. I have a lot of Portland Police Bureau people who live in my district but work in Portland, and they're, I think, working out of a fear mindset right now, and that is not helping anyone solve problems. And so it's up to the leadership in Portland and frankly at the governor's level to sit down with people on all sides of the issue and make a real plan to move forward and not just keep hoping it'll resolve itself somehow.
Good. Can you point us to an area in which you can demonstrate independence from your caucus, someplace where you differentiate yourself from the Democratic orthodoxy?
So I think the biggest place, there are a few of them, but the biggest place I've separated with my caucus has been on the issue of agriculture in general. And a particular bill I can point to would be the chlorpyrifos ban. They ran that bill through Energy and Environment when I was on that committee in 2019, and it did not pass. No, they ran it through Ag and Land Use and it did not pass. Then they ran it through Energy and Environment and I voted no. And then they moved it over to healthcare in the short session because it didn't pass due to the Republican walkouts in 2019. My issue is not that the legislature doesn't have a role to play in managing the, people's exposures to toxic chemicals, but it is a tool that some of our ag producers use and have to use in order to be eligible for export. Oregon has a very diverse agriculture economy. We export over 65 different products. Most states export fewer than 10 different products. And so limiting a tool at a time that we're also talking about how climate is causing pests to move to different zones just did not seem like the right choice, given that the labels had told us they were not interested in doing the science to find alternative chemicals for our crops to use. So from a food security standpoint and a jobs protection standpoint, I voted with the Republican minority, both on the minority report and on voting no on that bill, while sort of behind the scenes working with all of the advocates to put a better plan forward.
Great. Not to rush out of the room, but we have, I think, 22 of these we're doing in 2 days. So are there other topics that you wanted to discuss that we haven't brought up yet?
Well, I mean, I wish my opponent were here. I had some things I was hoping that he would have an opportunity to discuss. But from where I sit, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. But there's nothing I'm like, God, I wish they had asked me this question.
Well, let me ask this. So this is a bit of a cheat given that he's not in the room to argue back, but I'm just curious and I want to learn. What's the argument he's using against you right now that you are most troubled by?
Well, I guess the thing that bothers me is it feels like he's running more against the supermajority than he is running against me as a representative of our district. I think if you would match us up head to head in terms of who best represents this district, I would come out as the clear favorite. It's not my fault that, the voters have chosen Democrats all across the state. And so my question for him would be, if the supermajority is such a problem for the state of Oregon, what does the Republican Party need to change about their platform or their priorities so that the voters can feel comfortable electing a more balanced legislature? Because I do truly agree that a balanced legislature puts forth better policy. The only control I personally have over that is to not win my race, and that's not something I'm willing to do. But I would like to see the Republican Party run candidates that can be competitive across the state, because I think we are better when we have a more balanced thought process going through the legislature.
Well, and it's not like the Democrats have actually, Republicans would disagree with me on this, but speaking as one of those Portland liberals, the Democrats haven't exactly run roughshod over the state.
I mean, and that's part of it that is extra frustrating to me. When they say that we're running roughshod, and then I'm like, go talk to Greg Smith and Shelley Bossart Davis and David Brock Smith and even Bill Post. He and I have voted together, being the only 2 yes votes on certain bills. He's about as conservative as they get. So to paint me as a Portland liberal and say that I'm sort of running roughshod over people when I called the speaker and got David Brock Smith's bill brought back up for the special session, and we got it passed because it was the right thing to do for the state, regardless of who proposed it. That's really frustrating. I worked with Lynn Finley to make one of his bills passable in the legislature because I cared about the fact that he wants to expand access to housing in his community, not because of who he is or what party he represents, but because it's the right thing to do. And so, yeah, it's frustrating to me to sort of be accused of being some sort of bully when I feel like I've done everything I possibly can to make sure everyone's voice, regardless of party affiliation, is respected and honored in the process.
Great. That makes sense to me. It is a confusing time to be engaged in political debate. I'll tell you that.
I'm with you on that.
Letitia, do you want to ask the fun question, or do you have any other questions beforehand?
I do not. We can go on to the fun question.
Fun.
So Anna, a representative, what is the most memorable Zoom call that you've had? Like one that really stands out to you, whether it was funny or embarrassing?
Does it have to have been an actual Zoom?
No, it could be just any virtual experience, I guess.
Okay. So when the pandemic first started, there was a weird period where like all of my friends were having their 40th birthday parties and we were all sad because we weren't able to spend time with one another. So we did a house party, that app where you can like pop around to different rooms. And we were kind of like, oh my God, I am Zoom exhausted. There's no way I'm going to enjoy this at all. We logged in at 7 and we logged out at 1 a.m. Friends had their kids in the room. We played Pictionary. Like it was one of the most fun birthday parties that I have been to. And it happened like snuggled up to my husband on our bed on a little cell phone. And that was absolutely the best, like most positive and also memorable sort of remote meeting experience that I've had.
I love that app.
It's
fun.
so fun.
All right. Well, Representative, thank you so much for finding time with us. I know it's short, but we enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck.
Bye. Thanks.